Hello and welcome to Atlassian in Seoul. My name is Bernard Ferguson, and today we're going to spend some time talking about tools and practices for teams. By the end of today, I want everybody here to take away one or two actions that you can use with your teams in the coming weeks. Maybe that's an action to take away a new product and try and experiment with a new product. Maybe that's an action to think about a new practice or play working that you can try with your team. Or maybe it's a new way to assess the performance of your team, to bring your team together to understand how your team is performing and to look for ways to improve. Now, I've got a little bit of a favour to ask you all today. Today is the 25th of May. Today is my wife's birthday. Thank you. And I haven't done anything. I don't have her a present yet. But I was wondering if you could all help me to have a happy birthday selfie. Is that okay? All right, so let me get my phone out. So in a big voice, happy birthday on 3, okay? All right, ready? 3, 2, 1, happy birthday. Perfect. That's awesome. Thank you very much. It's fantastic to see so many people here today. It really is exciting to talk about teams, to share information. Today is all about sharing. What I want you to do is to meet other people here today. I want you to explain to them some of the challenges, some of the opportunities that you have on your teams. I want you to take time to talk to our vendors. We have a whole heap of vendors here today who are hungry to talk to you about ways of implementing Atlassian products. Through this afternoon, we're going to give you an update on Atlassian products. We're going to talk to you about the latest and greatest updates that we have that are coming to our cloud products and some of the larger investments we're making in our server products. But also, we're going to share some insights into research that Atlassian has done on teams. Atlassian has 16 years of research on teams. And we've come up with some ideas and we've learned some lessons around what makes high-performing teams. So today we're going to dive into that with a little bit of detail. There is plenty of time for questions and answers today. So as we go through the presentation, please take note of questions you would like to ask. Please take note of questions that you would like to ask after this presentation and also towards the end of the day. At the end of the day, we have a fireside chat where we'll be on stage to talk about and answer any questions that you have. Remember, this day is all about sharing. This day is all about you and your teams. We're going to give you insights and information, but we want you to take that information back to your team. What is the action that you're going to take next week on Monday when you get into your office after the weekend that can turn your team and your teamwork into a more enjoyable place to work, where you can have a greater impact and then you can also focus on delivering greater business and customer outcomes. So that was what Atlassian in Seoul is going to be all about. Sharing information, talking about teams, and giving ourselves an opportunity to take our times away from our work to really think about how to improve. So, begs the question, doesn't it? How do we get great teamwork? What are the components of great teams? My job as at Atlassian is that I'm an R&D team coach. So I spend a lot of my time with product teams trying to find new ways to work, trying to be innovative in the way that we deliver products and services to customers, trying to make sure we have teams that are autonomous and empowered. And when we think about great teams, we often think about products. You're going to hear a lot today about Atlassian's products. You're going to hear a lot about Jira, Confluence, Stride, Bitbucket, and so on. But products alone aren't necessarily the thing that you need just to have great performing teams. We believe that to have successful teams, you need the right mix of not only the right products, but the right people. Having the right balanced team and right people on your team is so important to having successful teams. And then with the right people on your team, having the right practices. Practices are the ways of working for your team. The methodologies you use, the techniques that you run, the sessions that you love. Who here in this room today feels that they spend too much time in meetings? Just a show of hands. A couple of people, yeah. So meetings can be very hard to achieve great teamwork if you have a high degree of meetings. How can we turn those meetings around and make those practices more valuable for your teams? So we're going to dive into that in a little bit of detail. But first, I want to start sharing. As I mentioned, today is all about sharing. So I've got a little task for you to do. I'm going to give you 90 seconds, and what I want you to do is to think about a project team that you've worked on, which was amazing. What was the best project team that you've ever worked on in your career? What was that team? What did it feel like? What were the attributes of that team? What did they do that was amazing? And then I want you to share that with the person next to you. So first of all, think about the project team that you think was amazing, and then share that with the person next to you. I'm going to give you 90 seconds to talk together and to share that information with your colleagues. Okay? Any questions? No. Okay. 90 seconds. Pair up in groups of 2. Your favorite projects, why it was fantastic, and share that information with your colleague. Okay, go. Okay, thank you for that. I know it's very early in the morning, so I appreciate you thinking about your teams and the areas that you want to improve. At Atlassian, we've had 16 years of research on teams. We're always curious about how teams work and how to improve the performance of teams. Things like, what are the attributes of high-performing teams? What are the challenges teams face today? And how can we provide an environment for teams to be successful into the future? Things about, we also think about how teams can scale, how can they grow? What are the challenges that they were going to be faced and how they continue to be innovative? We believe to have successful teams, you need this right mix of people, products, and practices. Because if you just have products alone, there's a sort of a dirty little secret. A fool with a tool is still a fool. With tools alone, all you've done is enable that fool to be more powerful. You haven't supported them with the right practices and the right people. So getting that balance, getting that mix of people, products, and practices on your team is so important to unleashing the potential in every team. And why is that important for Atlassian? Well, at Atlassian, we believe that behind every great human achievement, there is a team. And our mission is to unleash the potential in every team. So we're constantly curious about teams and team health. And you might be asking yourself, why is team health so important? Why is this focus on teams and working together so important? If you go back to the industrial age, many tasks were done in isolation by individuals, and they're often set up to improve efficiency, to do the same thing as efficiently as possible over an extended period of time. If you made a 2 to 3% improvement in the efficiency of, say, a production line, that would have a big impact in terms of the output of the factory or the environment where you're working. But as we deal with more and more complicated situations, then we need to bring more of our teams together. Even in technology, if you think about technology, maybe 10, 20 years ago, with waterfall type projects, you'd often have teams of individual disciplines working in different areas of a project, right? So you'd have analysis, design, build, test, implement, and they'd all sort of pass from one to one. There was less of a need to work together. As we have more and more agile teams, as we have teams that are working closely together, bringing these disciplines together is more and more important. The importance of having cognitive diversity on teams is so important. So bringing these people together and having these teams working together is the reason why team health is so important. But unfortunately, as society and also in business, we tend to celebrate the lone genius. Like if you think about who landed on the moon, you're probably going to think about Neil Armstrong. If you're going to think about Steve Jobs, you probably think about him over Apple. Or in this instance, Steph Curry, this basketballer, is probably the person you think about when you think about the greatness of the Golden State Warriors. But one point on the Golden State Warriors, which is interesting, is that they actually have a higher pass completion rate relevant to many of their competitors. So what they do, for every time they have a basket, they're introducing and involving more members of their team than other teams across the NBA. So while we celebrate the lone individual, it's really the team that comes together that overcomes complex problems. And the importance of teamwork is something that organizations are struggling with, and there's challenges. In a recent survey, we found that 90% of problems are so complicated that organizations believe they need a team to be involved. That's 90%. So therefore, the lone genius in today's workforce, in today's organization, is dead. Not only are 90% of problems so complicated that they require a team, survey respondents said that 75% of teams that they're on, with cross-functional teams, felt dysfunctional. So this is a real problem. We have an example where we've got so much work needing to be done by teams, and people on teams feeling as though those teams are dysfunctional. Furthermore, the importance of team was really iterated by the fact that 50% of people identify with the team that they work on, like the people they work with every day, more so than the company that they work for, or their own individual goals, actually. When you come to work, you want to be surrounded by the people that you work closely with, and that is most important over the company objective or your individual growth. So teams and working together in teams is increasingly important. But there's challenges. We wouldn't have 75% of teams considering those teams as being dysfunctional without any challenges. And some of the challenges are things like these three things. If I had to boil them down into three things, this is what I would say are challenges that teams are facing. Teams are facing challenges around scale. Teams are facing challenges around being multipliers, individuals being multipliers. And also the challenge around effectively using time. So if I go into each of these in a little bit of detail. Scale. From now, your customers, the customers of your organization, they can move from your product to another product in a very small cost. Like switching cost is exceptionally low. So therefore, you need to be able to provide more and more customer value as quickly and as upfront as possible. We often can't see where competitors are coming from. For example, Borders thought that their competition would be from bookstores. If you know Borders bookstores, they thought other bookstores would be their competition. But in fact, things like the Kindle and the iPad were the things that really challenged and disrupted their market. There's also a massive war for talent, getting the right people into your team. And this is a challenge that really is underpinned by the significant rate of change, significant rate of and particularly challenges around scaling. You can now set up an organization in a garage in Seoul, and you can sell your products to the world. So this is the type of challenge of scale that organizations are facing. Also the thought about being a multiplier. In the past, as a manager, you were kind of the person that could hold all the information. And the more information you had was kind of give you more power. You were able to then control decision making. You were then able to control budgets and funding. But now in organizations, we want our teams to be autonomous. We want our teams to be multipliers. So as a leader, what our job is to do is to encourage and enable our teams to have a multiplier effect, to support them to grow so that they can be as close to the customer need as possible. My job as a coach at Atlassian is all about enabling and multiplying teams. I can't do that with the 400 teams that we have on a one-to-one basis. I need to find ways to multiply my impact so that I can impact 2 or 3 people, and then they can take that and share with another 2 or 3 people. And you see these positive changes happening through the organization. A lot of organizations have a lot of history. Has anyone here been in an organization that is over 20 years old? Yeah, quite a few. Anyone over 10? Yeah. Anyone less than 5, just out of interest? Less than 5? Okay. So what happens is, as organizations tend to grow and they tend to scale, they tend to reinforce some practices or processes, which makes it harder to continually change and grow. So as we grow, we also need to be in this area around multiplying. We also need to look for cutting out waste, for being lean, to work more effectively together. And the final thing is time. The funny thing about time, everybody has the same amount of time, 24 hours in a day, but many people feel time poor. I'd again be interested to the people in the room. Who here feels as though they're time poor? They don't have enough time to do everything they need to do in their day and work. Okay, a couple of people. For those people who are time poor, that's a natural constraint to feel. But what you can do with time poor is to think about the focus that you're having. Try to do less things and do them well, rather than doing many things and trying to achieve a lot in a week. If you can achieve 3 things and you do them really, really well, you crush them. If you can do that as opposed to doing 8 things sort of okay, you're more likely to have a bigger impact. And this is important, these challenges that teams face in terms of growing and being more effective. Because when we think about the industrial era and the sort of focus where the bureaucracy was kind of able to control organizations and set approaches, to teams now being in an environment where there's much more higher rate of change, teams need to be much more effective. So take a look at this slide and think about your teams. Where would you say that your teams fit on this slide? Are they mainly efficient, or are they areas where they are also effective? By being efficient, you often do the same task over and over again very well. A lot of the things that you'll see in efficiency are the things that are probably likely to be open to automation. As we move into the future, you'll see more and more things in this space which are open to automation. But if things are changing so quickly, and there's this need for being responsive and adaptive, then teams need to be more effective. For example, if you need to have a central process or structure in the way teams work, and every team needs to conform to that, other teams will not be able to adapt and change to their environment. And we know that change is coming faster and faster. So we're often trying to provide areas where we have guidelines or suggestions for teams, so that we have less bureaucracy and less focus on management and more enabling of teams to get on and do their job. Particularly with things like decision making. Like, I know decision making is a challenge. If you have centralized decision making with like senior executives and senior management making all the decisions, that inherently slows down teams. So if you can bring decision making to the coalface, to the teams, and teams are empowered to make decisions, then you're more likely to have a fast, higher velocity organization. Things like even like project status and communication, if they go all through a central area, that again is very slow. I remember as a project manager spending 4 o'clock to 6 p.m. every Friday night filling out status reports. It was a waste. I would have much rather been talking to my friends over a beer or going for dinner. But sitting there updating status reports was an example of project communication which was very, very ineffective. But it was efficient because everyone would do the same status update, we'd all use the same template, and we'd all send it to the management team that would review it on a Monday morning, and then half of the information provided in there would not be read. It was wasted time. I would have much rather looked for effective communication at the right time. And then the other thing is, it's really important in an efficient world to focus on output. How many hours of work did you do a week? I remember reading articles in magazines like CIO magazines saying, I'm the CEO of this organization and I work 80 hours a week. Really? So great. What did you achieve? What were the outcomes that you delivered? That is much more interesting conversation than how many hours you work per week. What was the impact that you had to your customer and to the business, which would be more important? So a real focus on outcomes is really important in having effective teams. So that begs the question, what makes an effective team? At Atlassian, we're always curious around teams. We spend a lot of time researching on teams. And we spent a lot of time to understand and look for areas, both internal to Atlassian, but also externally in market, around what is an effective team. And what we found was there is not a lot of information around there for teams. Most of the information was focused on individuals. How to hire individuals, if you think about HR. How to onboard individuals. How to develop growth plans for individuals. How to remunerate and provide bonuses for individuals. At this stage, there's not a lot of information dedicated to teams. But yet we work in teams. And yet we see the importance of working in teams is becoming more and more popular and more prevalent in organizations. So what we did at Atlassian is we've developed a way to assess the effectiveness of teams. And when we did that, there were a couple of key principles that we had in mind. We wanted to ensure as we were growing that we were keeping small teams. You often heard of, has anyone heard of the 2 pizza size team? Yeah. Basically a team of like 7 plus or minus 2 that you could get together with 2 pizzas, ideally. I eat a lot, so we might need 3 pizzas on my team. But ultimately you could eat those pizzas together and that's about the size of the team. So the team's relatively small. Having small teams enables teams to get stuff done and it reduces the communication overhead, and it reduces the amount of time it takes to get information done and tasks done. We also wanted to be 100% focused on delivering customer value. That is so important. Delivering customer value, understanding your customers. What are their constraints? What are their challenges? What are your opportunities? What information do you have on them? What analytics are available on your customers? What problems are you looking to solve for your customers? Having a really core focus on your customer. And then the third principle we wanted to think about is this network effect, where an organization operates as a network rather than a top-down structure. Rather than a top-down hierarchy, a network of teams working together, where individual teams could share information across different parts of the organisation without having to go up for management approval. The less decisions, for example, that go up for management approval, the better, because that enables your teams to be faster, to work with a higher degree of velocity. So, as a result, I'd like to introduce you to the Atlassian Team Playbook. When we look for ways to build effective teams, we didn't find a lot of information. So we built this ourselves. We did a lot of research on Atlassian teams, and we also did research externally. And we've built this Atlassian Team Playbook. And today, I'm going to give it to you absolutely free. It's off the website of Atlassian.com. I'll share with you the URL at the end of this presentation. But as I mentioned at the start, Atlassian is all about unleashing the potential of every team. So we want you to use the Atlassian Team Playbook to help your teams improve how they work. So what is the Atlassian Team Playbook? It's a set of practices, techniques, and approaches that you can use on your teams. It's not a process document. Think of it less of process and more of guidance. Process was in the efficiency side of the scale, right? This is more around effectiveness. We're providing teams with enough information that they can choose how they do their work. And the consistency that you'll get with using some similar plays across teams really helps to enable communication across your organisation. We also mentioned the impact of being a multiplier, the importance of being a multiplier. By sharing practices and plays within the team playbook, you can have a multiplying effect. And I'll give you an example. One of the teams that we had at Atlassian was looking to improve our post-incident review process. So there was an incident, and how we went about solving that incident, resolving that incident, updating the customer, and then going and finding the root cause of that incident. One of the things we found was that through that exercise, our communication to our customers and also our communication internally wasn't fantastic. There was a lot of things we could improve. For example, there was coming together to work on the incident. And it wasn't too sure which information was the right information to share. Should we use email? Should we use Stride? Should we use a Confluence page? Should we use a whiteboard? How are we going to communicate as a team during an incident? And who has the responsibility to update the customer? We should have one point of communication to the customer. So one of the teams in San Francisco built out a play using the team playbook with values around post-incident reviews and also communication plan around post-incident reviews. They were a team of 6 people. It was a very small team. But then they used the Atlassian Team Playbook to share. And then they shared that with the rest of the organisation. So one team was then able to share their approach to incident reviews with just under 3,000 staff that we have at Atlassian today. So that is a great example of one team having a significant multiplying effect across the organisation. Now, I know if you think about one of your teams, there's probably something in one of your teams that you think is amazing. They're doing really well, but you're not sharing it with the rest of your organisation. This is where the team playbook comes in. It allows you to share practices across the organization. It includes a collection of workshops, activities, and different techniques that you can use in your organization. Think about the playbook as kind of like a facilitator for your team. Like if you get your team together and you set up a meeting invite, say you have a weekly project status update, you can use the Atlassian team playbook to pull in a play or a health monitor, which I'll go through in a little bit of detail later, and then to have that as part of your agenda. I'm going to give you a little introduction to what the Atlassian team playbook is all about. It comprises of two main aspects. The Atlassian team playbook comprises of health monitors. Health monitors are a 1-hour session. One of the takeaways that I would love you all to do with your teams in the next 2 weeks is to run a health monitor session with your teams. Get your whole team together for 60 minutes, just 60 minutes. And what you're going to do is use a health monitor approach to assess the performance of your team. You're going to assess the performance of your team against 8 key attributes. And these 8 key attributes are formed from the research that we've done on Atlassian teams and also other customers. You might be in a leadership team that might be responsible for setting the vision and purpose of the organization or your business area. You might be in a service team, which is responsible for doing queue-based work, kind of like an IT help desk. Or you might be on a project or product team. Most commonly, you'll be on a project team. Project team is probably the health monitor that is used the most. And once you've run your health monitor session using the project team health monitor, then you're going to find areas that you want to improve. That's where the plays come in. So we have about 28 plays on the Atlassian team playbook, and these are the sessions, workshops that you can use to turn your area of health that you want to improve around, to improve the health of your team. So to summarize the Atlassian team health monitor playbook in a little bit of detail, we have health monitors. That's where you assess the performance of your team. The best time to do that was probably yesterday. The next best time to do it is Monday. This will give you an indication of where your team is performing and areas where you want to improve. And then once you have that, then you use the plays to exercise, to turn any areas which are not healthy on your teams, to turn them into healthy. Now, a little bit more on the Atlassian team health monitor and the 8 attributes of high-performing teams. Back in 2014, we did a research exercise. At Atlassian, we had about 750 staff, and we had around 35,000 customers. Today, we have around just under 3,000 staff, and we have 130,000 different customers across the globe. So we've grown significantly. And I talked about some of the principles we wanted to have when we grew. We wanted to have small teams. We wanted to have teams which were multipliers, and we wanted to have teams which had that network effect. This was the tool that has allowed us to do that. This is the tool, amongst other things, that has enabled teams to really understand how they're performing and the health of their team. And it's a fun, interactive session. Some of the attributes that we found when we did research on teams, that teams that were being successful had in common were things like having a full-time owner. A full-time owner is a champion for the project, someone who can unblock the project team, someone who can champion the mission both inside the team but also outside of the team. If there's a major decision to be made, the full-time owner is the person who can help to drive that decision. We also found that high-performing teams had balance. They had a balanced team. They had a balance of skills, they had a balance of experience, they had a balance of perspectives. Great teams have cognitive diversity, and they use that. Because your customers have lots of different backgrounds, and therefore bringing that diversity into your discussion when you're thinking about building products is really important. But my favorite attribute of high-performing teams is shared understanding. Shared understanding is that your whole team, everybody on your team, understands your purpose. Why does this team exist? If this team wasn't working on this project, what would we not get? Why do you exist? What is your why? And then there's other areas like value and metrics. What is the value you deliver to your customers and the business, and how would you measure that? And so on and so forth down into velocity. Now, what we would do in a session with the health monitor is a little bit like this. So this is a photo of me and a team doing a health monitor a couple of weeks ago. What we would do is we go through each of those 8 areas. And you can do this in a whiteboard. You can do this off the Atlassian team Playbook. It doesn't have to be, it's product agnostic. You don't have to have a product to do this. You just need your team together in a room. And you go through each of the 8 areas. So let's say, for example, full-time owner. Everyone in the room would vote. Now, you're all familiar with paper, rock, scissors? 1, 2, 3. Yep. So you would all vote. So the first attribute would be full-time owner. And then everyone would go, 1, 2, 3, vote. If you think that your team or project has a full-time owner, then you're going to give a thumbs up. Yes, we have a full-time owner. Great. If you're not sure, oh, no. It could be Mathnori, or it could be Kate, it could be Jane, I don't know. You go like this. You're sideways. You're not sure. Right? And if you're really just no idea, I don't know who the full-time owner, I don't know who is the leader for this project, then you would be red. Okay? Right? And then on the count of 3, 1, 2, 3, everyone would vote. And what you're going to do is get some people would be green. Yeah, I know who it is. And then some people might be red. I'm not too sure. In that situation, if one person is red, like this, and the other person is green, who do you think is right? Who do you think is wrong? Well, that's a bit of a trick question, right? Because no one's wrong, and no one's right. They just have different perspective on the health of the team. And that's great, because that's where the discussion starts. That's where you get to the heart of team performance. I thought it was Mary, but you think it's Jane. Like, why do you think it's Jane? Like, Jane's never here. She's always having coffee. Like, she's never with me on my team. Okay? And these are the type of conversations that you have through a health monitor. This is probably one of close to 200 or more health monitor sessions I've run with different teams. And I can't go to too many meetings which are the same. The reason I can go to over 200 sessions like this is because they're all different. Every team has a different conversation. And every team has different areas where they want to improve. So remember when we thought about efficiency versus effectiveness. You're not going to get efficiency through a health monitor. You're going to get effectiveness. A health monitor is all about driving effectiveness because each individual team will recognize their areas to improve, and then they will use those areas to improve for their individual team need. We have made the health monitor template available in Confluence. So if you're a Confluence customer for server or cloud, you can download it from the marketplace. For server customers, just ask your admin to add the health monitor template into your instance, and you'll be able to use it with your teams. Here's an example of one that we'd filled out for a project that I'm involved in. And what you see is it's really interesting to see the health of a team that changes over time. We often think, forming, storming, norming, performing. Teams improve, go in a straight line. But it's not the case. If you look at, for example, shared understanding, it started red for this team. And then with a little bit of work, we turned that into green. And then a couple of months later, it went back to amber. And the reason it went back to amber is because different people changed on the team. When people left, the understanding and the shared understanding around the purpose of the team changed. So with the health monitor, I recommend that you run them every month. It's 60 minutes every month. You probably already have a project team meeting. I would cancel that. I would cancel that team meeting for that week, and I would run a health monitor instead. And then most importantly, when you define the actions that you want to do to improve the performance of your teams, make sure you get them done. Turn them into done. We've also made this available on a Trello board, so that it works really well with remote teams. I won one session on this. I had someone in Amsterdam, I think it was like 5 a.m. I had people in Boston, in DC, I was in Sydney. Everyone was across different hours of the day. And just by using the VC, we can go through and then vote on the camera and then have a conversation. So this works really well on VC. And this team here are using it through a Trello board to map out where they are and to have that discussion via the Trello board, which is relevant, really good use for distributed teams. So if you think about the projects that you're working on, remember at the start of this session I asked you to think about, what are the things that you think about your team which is really great? Like, what is a project you're working on and why do you think that's working? Now I want you to think about your projects, your teams. What are the major projects that you're working on today? When you go back to work on Monday, I'm assuming you're not going back to work today, but when you go back to work on Monday, what across these areas are your team struggling with the most? Maybe you're struggling with shared understanding. Maybe you're struggling with having a balanced team. But what are the things that you think you can improve for your team? This is what the health monitor is all about. And it's a key practice that Atlassian teams use to be effective. Okay, so you've done it. Wind forward a couple of weeks. Congratulations, you've run a health monitor and you know your areas to improve. That's when the plays kick in. This is where you use the plays to understand how you're going to improve. So for the next 10 to 15 minutes, I'm going to give you an update on a couple of plays in action that we've been using at Atlassian. I'm going to walk you through objectives and key results. Is anyone here familiar with objectives and key results? No. Great, that's awesome. And anyone here using KPIs? Okay, that's quite a lot of folks. So I'm going to talk to you a little bit about objectives and key results and why we use them at Atlassian. I'm also going to talk about one play called Project Poster, which is great for communicating status of projects. And then finally, I'm going to talk about our DAISY framework. So apologies for another acronym, but DAISY is a way to set roles for decision making. And what I'll also try and do is link them back to the health monitor. So where areas are red in the health monitor, this is where the plays link in. But a little bit more on each play. So these, I've given you an example of the 3 plays to go through. But there's about 28 plays that are available. This one is the project poster. It shows you the information on the job to be done, how to use it. It also gives you information on how to run this session. Things like who to invite, how much preparation time do you need, and how long will the session take. Think of it like a recipe card. It's a recipe card for a session that you're going to run. So, okay, let's do this. Objectives and key results. Objectives and key results are all about goal setting. I talked before earlier about the importance of having a focus on outcomes, not outputs. This is exactly what objectives and key results help you to do. Objectives and key results were developed by Intel and made famous by Google, and at Atlassian we've been using them for about 2 to 3 years. We've found that they're really valuable if you run a health monitor and you are struggling with value and metrics. If you're struggling with your team understanding your purpose, the outcome you want to achieve, your shared understanding, or your velocity isn't great, objectives and key results are fantastic to use. They're really great because they allow you to do 2 things which I think is fantastic. Firstly, to set stretch targets. KPIs would often be like, let's get a 10% increase, and you either hit it or don't. Say 10% increase in sales. You either hit it or you don't. What if you got 20%? There's no real recognition of that within KPIs. But objectives and key results really try to push you to achieve stretch outcomes. And also they look forward. This is an example of a template where you would set your objectives and key results. Your objectives are aspirational. They're qualitative. They want to set your team up to be inspired, to sort of go out beyond the realms of their comfort zone. And then the key results are the things that you need to be able to measure to show the impact that you're having and the impact that you're having for customers and for the business. And here's an example of objectives and key results that I use on my team. So we set them every quarter. So we set objectives and key results for a quarter, and then we score them every month. And we involve the whole team in setting them up. And here again, you can see this in Confluence. If you're not a Confluence customer, then you can get the PDF like this available from the Atlassian website. So you can use this for goal setting on your teams. In the Confluence instance, we've also got instructional text. The instructional text provides you information on how to complete objectives and key results, and you can use that in conjunction with the play. Okay, objectives and key results. The next is around project communication and project posters. Communicating to the right people at the right time is a massive overhead that organisations struggle with. The project poster is a brilliant tool to use to build shared understanding and to get everybody on the same page. I think it's brilliant because it answers 5 key questions. What are you doing? What are you building? Why are you building? What is the problem and the impact of the problem from a customer's perspective? How are you going to measure success? Is another question that it asks. And when you see this example of a team from Confluence, when they wanted to simplify the Confluence experience. So the Confluence dashboard that you see and use today was built using this project poster. It also asks you to align how you align to strategy. So when you see it in edit mode, you can see how does this project align to the strategy of the organisation. So that's another key in question to ask. And then the last thing it provides is an update on the status of the project. Is this status project active? Is it inactive? Have we shipped? This is where a project poster is really valuable to communicate the status of your project. And it's important to note that this is a living document. You'll update it through the life cycle of your project over and over. If you've got a whole heap of projects running now and people don't know the status of where each project is and what's happening in each project, I definitely recommend you take an action to look at the project poster. And finally, the DAISY. So DAISY is an acronym, but it helps to drive decision-making, clarity of role. It calls out who is the decision maker in terms of the driver, who's driving the decision, who's the one person who is approving it, who is contributing, and who is informed. It will help with decision-making for leadership teams. It will help with shared understanding for teams. It also really helps with balanced teams, so everyone knows and has a clear view of the roles that they play. It presents different options for decisions. We can do nothing. We could do option A. We could do option B, option C. Here's one that we use to think about language packs in our products back in 2016. You'll see that we have one driver. You'll see that we have one approver. And we can see that you've got a number of people that are contributing. But it's also important, particularly as organisations grow, I talked about the challenge of scale, that you call out people that are informed. If you are informed, we don't want you to input into the decision because it'll slow us down. But we want you to know what's happening. As organisations want to go fast, the more people involved in the decision slows them down. Calling people out to informed isn't a polite way of saying, we want you to know what's happening, but we don't need your input for us to progress. So being really clear on that is important. The other thing is that you might not want to use DAISYs for every decision. Just think about them for high impact and high risk decisions. Here's an example of the template. Again, it has instructional text that you can use. Use the instructional text in conjunction with the play from the Atlassian team playbook. This is the URL for the Atlassian team playbook, and it's also available through the slides and the materials that you got when you came in today. When you're looking around and using the playbook, most people tend to bookmark the site, they look around, explore, and they also look to join our user group. So this is kind of like a user group. It's like an email list that we have where we share information. We share latest information from Atlassian teams. We share insights that we see from customers. And we also share new plays and practices that we're wanting to share. So please take a time to have a look at the Atlassian team playbook. There's, at registration, there's a couple of these kits. So this is a health monitor kit. If you're really excited and want to go and run a health monitor session with your team in the next few weeks, pop down to reception. We've got a couple of these kits. It's just a physical version of the health monitor that you can use to run with your teams. So to finish, I wanted to leave you with this. Remember that healthy teams aren't built in a day, but healthy teams are built each and every day. Go back to your organizations next week. Take ideas and tips and ideas that you can do to consistently improve the performance of your teams. Thank you very much.